Let us now talk matters of national importance, and this week we do talk about an issue that has been talked about in different bulletins, in different newspapers. And if I may remind you, earlier this week the Ministry of Health confirmed what everyone has been afraid of, that a person in Uganda had contracted Ebola after coming in from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now the pandemic has already wreaked havoc in Congo, claiming at least 1,400 lives this year alone. Tonight we do talk to Dr. Fred Nsereko, a physician from Nakasero Hospital, about this issue. Many thanks for joining us on this program.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, we do want to start by asking you the very first question. What causes Ebola?
So Ebola is one of so many viral hemorrhagic fevers, and like the name goes, it's caused by a virus. It's a virus that is usually transmitted from bats, fruit bats specifically.
Fruit bat?
Yes. Also, people who like to move around, it's transmitted when people move around in caves where these bats are found. When people go into these caves, there are droppings. Also animals, wild animals like antelopes and other primates, chimpanzees, gorillas, have been found to have this virus. And it's postulated that the natural reservoir, or the animal that usually has this virus, is the fruit bat.
According to you as a physician or as a person that has interacted with different people and different patients, and also probably patients of Ebola, I would imagine, what would you say are the symptoms or the very first symptoms of a patient with Ebola?
So it's very crucial that we have a high index of suspicion, because initially when people get Ebola, their symptoms are not unlike those of malaria or typhoid. So it can begin with fevers, headaches, general body weakness. The weakness can get very severe to the point of prostration or total lack of energy. You can have vomiting, you can have cough, you can have a sore throat. So typically you're supposed to suspect Ebola if a person has visited an area where it has been announced that this virus is currently causing problems there. So in our instance, or in Uganda, if you find someone from Congo, someone has traveled to Kasese, which is one of those regions they've now declared as Ebola zones. If you find this person is developing these symptoms, you must have a high index of suspicion. This person is supposed to be isolated. It's supposed to be given equipment, medical equipment, that is dedicated to just handling this person. So basically, the sad part is it presents the same way malaria or typhoid would present. And what we fear, basically the bleeding from all body openings, is something that usually happens a bit late in the course of the disease, whereas people start to pass on this disease the minute the symptoms develop. Symptoms which could be as simple as headache, fevers, cough, sore throat.
But again, how long does it take for these symptoms to manifest? So
usually if you've been exposed to Ebola, it takes between 4 to up to 2 weeks, 4 days to 14 days for the symptoms to kick off. It can take as long as 21 days.
4 days too?
Between 4 days,
yes,
and 21 days, the latest, for the symptoms to show up. So it will be typically someone who has traveled to an endemic area, typically Zaire. The largest outbreak was in Sierra Leone, Guinea, in West Africa. That was in 2014, 2016. So also those regions, whereas they were declared Ebola free, it is not unusual that people from there coming to Uganda, which has been Ebola free until I think the 10th of June, just recently, when they identified a little boy that had traveled to DRC for a grandfather's burial and came back with symptoms of Ebola.
What, in your opinion, according to you actually, what would you advise, for instance, the family that is currently fighting Ebola?
Okay, so
because for some reason it feels like once someone contracts or gets Ebola, that is the end. So for people dealing with relatives and friends that have Ebola, what would you say they should put into consideration?
okay, first it's important to understand the context of Africa, where people who like to really give care hands-on to our sick people. But if you have a sick relative who presents with severe fevers, with joint aches, with vomiting, throat pain, and you know this person has traveled to a place like DRC, a place like Kasese, it's wise that you limit the number of people who are seeing this person. It's wise that you protect yourself with gloves, with aprons. It's wise that you notify the authorities. In this case, the nearest health facility. You need to make sure that in the process of looking after this patient, you do not expose yourself and so many other people, because the minute we suspect a case of Ebola, the recommendation is we're supposed to track all the contacts that this person has interfaced with. And these people are supposed to be monitored for a minimum of 21 days. So you see the inconvenience it creates for a lot of people. And the trade-off is that this is a disease that is in most cases fatal. Yeah. So you need to limit the number of people seeing this person, you need to protect yourself, and you need to report to the authorities the minute you realize a relative of yours, a friend of yours could be having Ebola.
And now to the biggest question that most people would really love to have an answer to. Can Ebola be cured?
Yes and no. For the most part, Ebola has a very high fatality rate. Most of the people who get Ebola die. From the largest epidemic in 2014, 2016, the West African epidemic, the fatality rate was 60% of all the cases that were identified. So this is an improvement from the outbreaks that we had like in 2000 when it broke out here in Uganda, and it was really high. I think it was quoted to be something like 89. This improvement is mostly because we are now more responsive, we are more knowledgeable, and people are a bit aware of the disease. I think the biggest part is we need to improve awareness to this disease, because if people who are suspected to be having Ebola are identified early, this can actually help stop a very big epidemic. In DRC there is an issue of people actually stealing their relatives from health facilities, because there is a lot of superstition that possibly there is witchcraft, there is a lot of suspicion, tribalism and what have you, and also the white man bringing it to us. So we need a lot of awareness to actually break some of these mental handicaps.
There's also been a talk, or there's been so many people saying there is a possibility of a vaccine. Do you think as the public or the general population should pay attention to this? Should they take it serious, or should they even trust it?
So there hasn't been a massive rollout of a vaccine for Ebola. To this point, the vaccine they are rolling out is experimental. However,
what does it do exactly?
So they basically get a fragment of protein from this virus, and they expose it to your body, and your body is supposed to mount a response and form certain protective substances called antibodies. So the minute you get the disease, you will not experience a very severe form of the disease. The vaccination doesn't prevent you from getting the disease. However, it stops you from getting the very severe form that would have killed you.
So there's no vaccine to cure it at all?
The vaccine is not curative. It simply helps you not to get the very severe form of a disease that would have killed you. So it improves your chance of surviving this. Now, some people are more gifted than others, immunity-wise. There are people who actually survive Ebola the natural way. They get the disease and their body fights. And these people, actually there is also some treatment that they are looking into, getting those hardy people who get this immunity and getting the antibodies, or those substances that are protective, and they inject them into people who are likely to face this disease, or the Ebola suspects and confirmed cases. So
there's also been an issue where most of the places you go to, I'm sure so many of us have seen that, you go to a place and they make you wash your hands. How does that stop you from contracting Ebola?
Okay, hand washing, broadly speaking, is the most effective way you can stop the transmission of any of so many diseases. So it's not something that you restrict to just Ebola. Hand washing should be a daily practice in our day-to-day lives, because
there
it
is
stops
actually
almost
a chemical,
everything.
or there's something they put in that disinfectant that they give you.
Most of hand washing is done with just soap and water. The other chemicals that usually use, there is alcohol, percentages of alcohol of 65 up to like 100 that we use routinely. Even in general practice, we use those to disinfect the hands in case we do not have visible stains on the hands. When you have visible stains on the hands, you wash your hands. But alcohol-based hand rubs are not very available everywhere. However, there is water and soap everywhere, and it's more relevant to actually wash your hands to prevent disease.
And maybe finally, to Ugandans that would like to travel to Kasese, to maybe Congo, would you advise them to do so?
So if you must travel to Kasese, there is nothing to stop you from traveling. However, it's important to know that the ministry issued an advisory, a warning, that Kasese has had confirmed cases of Ebola. And actually, the young boy who died was a native of Uganda who had gone to DRC to bury a grandfather. And I think the mother of the child had also looked after that grandfather. So all of these people died. These people had come in contact with so many other people, so there is a number of people that are being observed for that mandatory period of up to 21 days. There is nothing to stop you from going to Kasese. However, you have to take precautions. Precautions like avoiding contact with body fluids, because we know that Ebola is transmitted through body fluids, which may include saliva, which may include semen through sexual contact, which may include sweat, which may include samples. Like us health workers, you take off samples to screen for malaria, screen for typhoid and all that. These samples actually contain the virus. And also there is a fear that this virus could be transmitted through air droplet. So we need to take all these precautions to make sure we do not come in contact with these body fluids and aerosols.
Thank you so much for coming to our studios tonight.
Thank you.
And maybe I should also add one or two. We should actually take the hand washing seriously, and like he said, it's very important that we take precaution. Be careful with the places you go to, be careful with the people you meet, and also pay attention to the few symptoms that you see on yourself, so that you can get proper treatment and probably arrested, as I would like to call it, when it's still in its very, very first stages. That was it in Talk of the Nation. Thank you for joining us tonight.